Hi, everyone. Pete Sardis for The Lawyer You Know, and we are back talking about Elizabeth Holmes. A couple of things have happened over the course of the last few weeks that I'm going to share with you. We're going to talk about what her post-sentencing motions look like. We're also going to talk about the prison that she has been assigned or has been recommended by the judge. But before we do that, as always, if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you've enjoyed this series, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done so. And as always, leave me your questions and comments down below. All right, let's get into it. Elizabeth Holmes, as we thought, was going to appeal her sentence. That notice of appeal has been filed. In addition, her lawyers have filed the motion for supersedeas bond. If you remember in the previous videos, we talked about Elizabeth Holmes most probably filing this motion and asking the judge to allow her to stay out on bond pending the outcome of her appeal, meaning so she doesn't actually have to go to prison while her appeal is pending. Now, is this something that happens? Yes. Is it common? No. But let's talk about it. The defense team filed a 20-page motion asking the judge to allow Elizabeth Holmes to stay out on bond pending appeal. And what they've said is, number one, she has a stellar record being on pre-trial release, meaning the time that she was out on bond before the trial happened, and that she's got no issues with anybody at probation who's been monitoring. Number two, she has significant family ties to this community, and she has not fled, nor has there been any inkling that she would flee from the prosecution of this case or try to flee justice. Part three, the defense team's motion generally speaks about the significant issues of law and fact involved in this case. Now, why is that important? One of the issues for the court to consider on allowing Elizabeth Holmes to stay out on bond is whether or not the issues involved in this case are so substantial that they could go either way, meaning that if the appellate court takes this case and reviews what the court has done, reviews the evidence, reviews the court's rulings, there is a serious possibility that the appellate court may take a very different stance than the judge. And if that's the case, the court should consider giving her the opportunity to be out on bond. That way she doesn't go to prison for no reason. So if the court determines that there are significant issues of law and fact in this case that the Court of Appeals could potentially see in a very different light, he can, of course, issue the order allowing her to remain out on bond. Now, what else have the Holmes camp done? They've also had her family post in advance a $500,000 bond to secure Elizabeth Holmes' presence, meaning should she flee the country, should she leave, should she go to a place where she cannot be extradited to serve a prison sentence, then the family would lose the $500,000 that they posted for bond. Is that enough money? That's a question for you to decide. Normally, I will share with you in federal cases, there really is never a cash bond. Most bonds in federal court are signature bonds, meaning if you post a bond, you don't actually have to bring the money to the courthouse. All you have to do is sign a piece of paper that says, if this person does not show up, I will then forfeit X amount of dollars. Apparently, Elizabeth Holmes' family has posted cash at this point of $500,000 to show a good faith effort to the court that they're serious about this and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. Beyond that, let's take a look here. There is, again, the discussion about Elizabeth Holmes' second pregnancy, which between you and me, I don't think is going to gather a lot of sympathy from the judge. I believe, based on Sunny Balwani's turn-in date, that the court has already taken into consideration the fact that Elizabeth Holmes is pregnant and is due with her second child by allowing her to self-surrender sometime in April, as opposed to Sunny Balwani, who was asked to self-surrender on March 15th. So Sunny Balwani gets sentenced, however many, 3 weeks or so after Elizabeth Holmes, and he has to turn himself into prison before she does. I believe the court has already taken into consideration that pregnancy in giving her the latitude to present to federal court by herself in April and not sooner, giving her an opportunity, I'm guessing, this is a guess, to have that baby and to have a little bit of time to bond with that child. But as we've talked about in the past, the Bureau of Prisons deals with pregnancies all the time. They have an entire plan set up for this. It's not new to them. It does not bother them. This is just part of running prisons. So they have a contingency for allowing for pregnancies to happen in private hospitals so that a baby is born not in a hostile environment. there's an opportunity for mother and child to bond outside of the actual confines of the prison. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted if the judge does in fact issue a supersedious bond for either Elizabeth Holmes or Sunny Balwani. And again, I'll keep you posted as to what happens with these appeals as things kind of progress down the line. I'm guessing that if Elizabeth Holmes does get a supersedious bond, and probably same with Sunny Balwani, the appellate process is going to be a little bit more protracted, meaning that the defense team will probably ask for extensions of time. The government will probably ask for additional time to brief whatever issues they have. So it's probably going to be maybe 18 months, give or take, before we get a resolution on those appeals. Now, if Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani do have to present to prison in March and April, I'm guessing that you're going to see that schedule really accelerated. Between you and me, I'd be surprised if the defense teams for both Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes have not already started writing those briefs. We know that the transcripts for all the testimony have already been ordered. They've got all the elements that they need to actually produce the initial brief. So I'm guessing those things are already in the works. But regardless, from a purpose of strategy, if she's out on bond, the longer they can delay it, the better it is for Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani. The reality, though, is if she's in prison, they're going to want to get these briefs filed immediately so that it cuts down that appellate time. So we'll probably see a briefing schedule and oral arguments requested, and that all that stuff's going to happen probably within that year mark and not further out. But again, we'll see how it happens. At the end of the day, the appellate courts run their own dockets. They're very efficient compared to the state courts for the most part, and I believe that they're going to make this kind of work its way through the system as efficiently as they can. But let's talk about some more interesting things. The judge has issued an order for Elizabeth Holmes, not an order, a recommendation in the judgment and sentence that he's issued for a facility for Elizabeth Holmes. Now, if you remember, it was my guess that Elizabeth Holmes was most likely going to be sentenced and asked to, or set to do her time at a facility somewhere in California, most likely within 100 miles of her home of record, because normally the Bureau of Prisons likes to keep families close. They don't really like sending people all over the country for no reason if they can avoid it, because they recognize that it's not just the inmate. It is the family members and friends of the inmate that also are going to have to make accommodations to be able to visit and do the things that need to be done to come and give support to people that are incarcerated. Now, does it always happen? No, the Bureau of Prisons deals with inmates individually, and the Bureau of Prisons will always house people as best as they can and try to accommodate all of the parties in interest, to include the court's recommendation. But Judge Davila has asked that Elizabeth Holmes be sent to Bryan, Texas. Not exactly close to anywhere she lives in California. It is a minimum security facility. And from what I have gathered, just by kind of doing a little bit of quick research, frankly, this isn't very scientific. What I did was I kind of looked for people that have made comments on this particular facility in Bryan, Texas. And the general consensus is this is not club fed. This is if not the worst facility you can be in as a female, there is a lot of chatter that it's not one of the best. It's kind of towards the bottom of the spectrum in regards to facilities and in regards to the way that inmates are treated and the freedoms that they have in the facility. So let's talk about what we think Elizabeth Holmes will have to do when she gets to her facility, presuming it's going to be in Bryan, Texas. Again, the Bureau of Prisons has complete and total control over where they house inmates. It is their decision. It is their mandate to figure out where people go, but they always take into consideration the court's recommendations, and they will always take into consideration the family ties to try to minimize the effect outside of the inmate. So Bryan, Texas, apparently when you get there, the chatter is that the first thing you do, all the newbies go right to the kitchen and you're basically washing dishes, pots, pans, all of that stuff. You're in kitchen duty, which starts at about 4:30 in the morning. So a very early morning for new people at the facility. They apparently do assign new inmates with a big sister who is supposed to kind of walk them through the facility and kind of get them acclimated to life behind bars. So let's see how that comes out with Elizabeth Holmes, recognizing that she is going to be someone that has notoriety in the prison. Obviously, everybody in the country and frankly, a lot of people in the world know who she is because this entire trial has been publicized. They have TV in prison. I'm guessing they know who she is. So we'll see how she's treated when she gets here. She's either going to be a superstar or she's going to be, and let me clarify this before I say it, a target. But I don't think that she's going to be a target of physical violence because, again, remember the people that are assigned to these low and minimum security facilities, they don't want to risk their classification by getting into a fist fight or doing something stupid that makes them go to a facility with like honest to goodness prison bars. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of physical issues, but I think you'll see a little bit more of emotional and mental intimidation. I think you'll see a lot of people kind of, acting tough with her just to get a rise out of her. So we'll see how that comes together. We'll see if there's any chatter again when, presuming Elizabeth Holmes presents to prison, if it's this facility, if that's how she'll be treated. Now, there are opportunities, like we talked about, for her to be involved in prison life outside of just sitting in the kitchen because she is a high school graduate. And let's be real, even though she didn't graduate college, she has plenty of college. There's a good chance she may be involved in teaching other inmates just kind of better life skills. For example, reading, writing, general GED type classes. There may be an opportunity for her to participate in those types of things. We know that Elizabeth Holmes has volunteered for a number of hours in victims type events for women that have been the victims of violence. So there's a good chance you might go and be involved in some therapy sessions or some type of therapy outlets for inmates because of that experience. Again, we'll see what happens when she gets wherever she's getting to. Other than that, let's see, 300 minutes of phone time, which, divided by 30 days, that's how much time she's going to be able to talk to her family. So I'm not sure how many hours, I should say it this way. Let's say it this way. I don't know how many minutes a day she's actually going to speak to her family, meaning will she speak to them daily? Will she conserve some of these minutes so she can have lengthier conversations fewer times per week? This, of course, does not count the opportunity to speak with her lawyers. We as attorneys have unrestricted access to time with our clients, especially if somebody's pending appeal and we need to speak with them and talk about what those appellate issues are going to look like. So the lawyers have the ability to speak with her beyond just her 300 minutes per month, and that the lawyer discussions are not held against those 300 minutes. Other than that, she does have the opportunity to visit with her family, and that is contact visitation weekly. So, of course, I'm guessing that they'll bring the children at that point to see her for some visitation. If it were me personally, I would probably speak to my children on the phone. If the facility has video visitation, I would probably engage in that. I don't know if I'd want my family members. I wouldn't tell Billy, for example, Billy Evans, hey, bringing the kids to prison. If it were me, I don't know if I would subject my children to having to come through the prison system to visit me. I would probably just do it virtually. But again, you have the ability to do it. Your personal preference is your personal preference. As long as everybody's vetted, they can come see Elizabeth Holmes. But we're going to really have a better handle on where Elizabeth Holmes will serve her time when the Bureau of Prisons classification process is concluded. The initial process will happen before Elizabeth Holmes' turn-in date in April, which they will actually send her a letter and say, Dear Elizabeth Holmes, self-surrender to this facility on this day. And that's how you'll know where she's actually going to be housed. So we'll keep you posted as things happen. Now, of course, as you know from the previous videos, Elizabeth Holmes and her defense team have filed motions for supersedious bonds. If Judge Davila grants that motion, that will stay this prison turn-in. She will not turn herself in pending the result of the appeal, which could add about a year to 18 months to this timeline. So we'll see how that comes together. We'll keep you posted. Tell me what you think. Do you think Elizabeth Holmes is going to prison in April, or do you think that Judge Davila is going to sign off on the supersedious bond, allowing her to stay out of prison? Do you think that the Bureau of Prisons is going to accommodate the court's request and send her to Bryan, Texas? Or do you think that the Bureau of Prisons will accommodate the family and send her closer to home somewhere in California? Tell me what you think. Your guess is as good as mine. Let me know what else you have. Any questions about how this process works. We've done an entire video in the previously on this topic about how the Bureau of Prisons classification gets done. So if you want to go back and take a look at that, and if you have any questions beyond that, please let me know. Again, if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you enjoyed this series and you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, please subscribe now. And as always, questions and comments below.